A lone woman, disguised as a cleaner, walking into a Chicago courthouse with a secret that could shatter a corrupt judge's throne. Lila Monroe's got one shot to expose the truth in a system built to bury it. Will she bring justice to light or be crushed by the power she's challenging? Don't blink. This story's a roller coaster you can't miss. Lila Monroe, a 50-something custodian, slipped into a bustling Chicago courtroom with a hidden purpose: to expose a corrupt judge who'd twisted justice into a tool of bias. Dawn barely touched the gritty streets of Chicago's South Side, but Lila was already up in her cramped hotel room, a block from the towering courthouse. The place was sparse, a duffel bag by the bed, a neatly pressed uniform slung over a chair, and a burner phone in her grip. She stood by the window, staring at the city's waking pulse. Her face was steady, a mask forged by years of staying unseen, but her dark eyes burned with resolve. She hit dial and spoke low into the phone. "I've got the dossier. The reports don't lie. Same patterns, same complaints. I'm going in today. No spotlight, just eyes and ears." Her voice was calm but razor sharp. "This hearing's going to show us exactly who Judge Harlan is." A voice crackled back. Lila nodded once, firm. "Relax. I'm a ghost in that building. They'll never see me coming." She hung up, tucked the phone into a hidden pocket of her bag, and turned to her uniform, gray, unremarkable, with a maintenance patch stitched on. It was the kind of outfit that made people's eyes slide right past her. But Lila, she was anything but ordinary. She zipped up, tugged on worn sneakers, and checked the mirror. No fear, no doubt, just a woman ready to strike. She grabbed her duffel, pulled out a battered journal and a faded ID card, and stashed them in her bag's lining. No need for the card today. With a quick breath, she hoisted her cleaning cart and headed out, her heart steady, but her mission electric. The Cook County Courthouse loomed like a concrete giant, its glass doors catching the morning light. Lila knew its dark corners, its whispered scandals. She'd done her homework. Pushing through the employee entrance, she gave a quick nod to the guard, who barely looked up from his coffee. "Hey, Lila," he grunted. "Morning, Ray," she replied, voice soft but eyes scanning. The halls smelled of bleach and stale coffee, the buzz of early cases already filling the air. Lila maneuvered her cart toward courtroom 5A, wheels squeaking faintly. The room was alive. Lawyers shuffling papers, a young paralegal muttering nervously to her boss, a bailiff lounging by the door, sizing up the crowd. But the judge's bench, empty for now, radiated a quiet menace, like a predator waiting to pounce. Lila parked her cart by a utility closet at the back, blending into the chaos. She flipped open her journal, jotted a quick note, and slipped it back into her bag. No one batted an eye. At the defense table sat a young black man, maybe 19, named Devin Carter. His hands were clasped tight, his gaze locked on the floor, fear and defiance warring in his slumped shoulders. The room's judgment hung over him like a noose, but there was a spark in him, a kid who'd learned to stand tall in a world that kept pushing him down. Lila's eyes flicked to the bench. She knew Judge Vincent Harlan's rap sheet, rulings that favored power, complaints swept under the rug, a trail of skewed verdicts. The data was damning, but Lila wasn't here for rumors. She needed proof, raw, undeniable, the kind you only get by watching it unfold. She gripped her mop, playing the part of the invisible cleaner. To the suits and ties rushing past, she was nobody. But Lila Monroe was never nobody. She was a hunter, patient and precise, and today, justice was riding shotgun. The heavy doors of courtroom 5A swung open, and Judge Vincent Harlan strode in, his black robe trailing like a storm cloud. No words, no need. His presence alone commanded the room to its feet. The bailiff rattled off the usual formalities, but every eye was glued to Harlan. He moved with the swagger of a man who owned the city, his sharp jaw set, his silver hair slicked back. It wasn't his polished look that set nerves on edge. It was the weight of his name, a legend in Chicago's courts, feared by anyone who dared challenge him. Harlan had ruled Cook County for nearly 25 years. Locals called him iron-fisted but just. But that just part didn't ring true for everyone, especially not for black defendants or anyone too poor to matter. He'd built a reputation for steamrolling young lawyers, cutting off witnesses and stacking the deck against those who didn't fit his vision of order. The numbers didn't lie. Fairness wasn't his game. Today's case was proof. At the defense table sat Devin Carter, the 19-year-old kid Lila Monroe had clocked earlier, accused of snatching a phone from a Loop boutique and shoving the clerk. The evidence? A grainy security clip, a witness who couldn't keep her story straight, and a clerk who happened to be Harlan's poker buddy. Yet the prosecution was gunning for 4 years behind bars. The room buzzed as papers shuffled between lawyers, the air thick with unspoken verdicts. Harlan peered over his glasses, his gaze slicing through the crowd before landing on Devon. "Mr. Carter," he said, voice like a blade, "this court has no patience for punks who think they can dodge the law. No alleged, no fairness, just a sentence handed down before the trial even started." Devon sat rigid, hands clenched, his eyes betraying a flicker of fear beneath his defiance. His lawyer, Ethan Hayes, a rookie public defender barely out of law school, was already sweating, his tie askew. Meanwhile, Lila, tucked in the corner with her mop and cart, the same cart she'd pushed through the halls that morning, played her part perfectly. She scrubbed a bench, wiped a railing, but her eyes never left Harlan. She caught every move, the way he leaned in when the prosecutor spoke, the sneer when Ethan stammered a defense. Her journal, hidden in her cart, was already filling up with notes from the day's start, and now she added more, her pen swift and silent. Harlan's glance flicked her way once, but it slid right off. Like everyone else, he saw only a cleaner, not a threat. Leela let him think that. It was exactly why she'd come, just as she'd told her contact that morning, to be the ghost who sees everything. As the prosecutor spun a flimsy case, Lila's focus sharpened. She marked the witnesses' stumbles, the way Harlan swatted away Ethan's objections like flies. Her gut twisted. This wasn't justice. It was a performance, the ending scripted before Devin even sat down. But Lila wasn't here to watch the show. She was here to rewrite it. During a brief recess, Lila rolled her cart down a dim hallway toward Harlan's chambers, the squeak of wheels echoing off scuffed tiles. The air smelled of coffee and old wood. She was wiping a smudge from the wall when voices leaked through a cracked door, one unmistakably Harlan's, dripping with smug ease. "These kids," he chuckled, low and bitter, "they stroll in, play the victim card, and expect a free pass. Back when I started, they knew better than to mouth off in my court." Another voice, District Attorney Paul Vargas, Leela recognized from earlier, laughed along. "Your room's still old school, Vince. No nonsense, no politics. That's why people respect you. Damn straight," Harlan shot back, "especially when some greenhorn lawyer wastes my time defending trash. That Carter kid, same as the rest, all excuses, no spine." Lila's hand stilled on her rag. This wasn't just talk, it was venom, casual and proud, the kind of truth she'd come to Chicago to uncover. She held her breath, ears straining. Vargas snorted. "Good thing it's just us. Imagine if that cleaning lady out there heard this." Harlan laughed, sharp and dismissive. "Her? She's nobody. Probably doesn't even get what we're saying." The door creaked open and Harlan stepped out, freezing when he saw Lila. His eyes narrowed, voice dropping to a hiss. "How long you been standing there?" Lila turned, her face a mask of calm, just like when she'd stared out her hotel window at dawn. "Just cleaning, sir," she said, steady, her gaze locking with his, no flinch, no fear, just the quiet promise of someone who had already seen too much. Judge Harlan's stare bore into Lila, his voice a low growl. "You didn't hear a thing, got it? And if you breathe a word, you'll wish you hadn't." He loomed closer, his words sharp as broken glass. "People like you don't matter here. You're nothing. Stay in your place." The hallway outside his chambers was dead quiet, the fluorescent buzz overhead the only sound. Lila, still gripping her cleaning rag, the same one she'd held while eavesdropping moments ago, didn't waver. Her face stayed calm, just like when she'd sized up the Chicago courthouse that morning. Slowly she folded the rag, set it on her cart, and met his gaze with steel. "Funny thing about nothing, Judge," she said, voice soft but cutting. "We see everything you miss." Harlan's jaw twitched, a crack in his armor so quick most would have missed it, but Lila didn't. She grabbed her mop handle, the same one she'd leaned on in courtroom 5A, and rolled her cart down the hall, each squeak echoing like a countdown. Harlan's threat hung heavy, but it only fueled her. What she'd overheard wasn't just gossip. It was proof, the raw truth she'd promised her contact she'd find. Judge Harlan wasn't just unfair, he was a predator in a robe, and Lila was done playing ghost. Back in courtroom 5A, the trial resumed, but Harlan wasn't the same. His steps to the bench were stiffer, his smirk forced, like a man who'd just glimpsed a shadow he couldn't shake. Lila, back in her corner with her cart, watched him like a hawk. She'd seen Devin Carter's fear that morning, the way he braced for a rigged fight, and now she saw Harlan's unease. He'd noticed her, really noticed her, and that was his first mistake. The afternoon dragged, the courtroom a pressure cooker of half-truths. Ethan Hayes, Devon's rookie lawyer, fought hard, pointing out holes in the prosecution's case, the shaky witness, the blurry footage, but Harlan shut him down, his gavel a hammer on hope. Devon sat silent, his hands still clenched, his eyes darting to the gallery where a few supporters whispered prayers. Lila's chest tightened. This wasn't justice. It was a trap, just like the one she'd seen coming when she'd first studied Harlan's record. As the lunch break cleared the room, Lila stayed behind, gliding through the aisles, wiping benches where spectators had sat. The air still hummed with the trial's tension. Near the judge's bench, she checked her surroundings. Empty. From her cart, she pulled her battered journal, the one she'd scribbled in at dawn. It wasn't just a notebook, it was her weapon, packed with months of notes on judges like Harlan. Dates, rulings, patterns of bias no one dared name. She'd been hunting men like him for years. She flipped to a fresh page, her pen racing. Harlan's sneer, his quick dismissals, his hallway venom. She was mid-sentence when a shadow fell over her. No need to look up. She felt the air shift, heavy with menace. "What's that?" Harlan's voice was ice, his tall frame looming a few feet away, arms crossed. He glared down, his usual swagger laced with suspicion, the same suspicion she'd sparked in the hallway. Lila closed the journal, slow and deliberate, her pulse steady. "Just notes, sir," she said, voice even, eyes locking with his like they had before. "Nothing special." Harlan's lips curled, but it wasn't a smile. "Notes on what? How to mop?" His tone mocked, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "You're here to clean, not scribble." Lila's faint smile didn't budge. "Don't worry, Your Honor, it's nothing you'd care about." The words were smooth, too smooth, and they hit a nerve. Harlan stepped closer, his shadow swallowing her space, but Lila stood her ground, her gaze unflinching. "You don't take notes," he snapped, voice low and tight. "You clean, that's your job, stick to it." His words were a warning, but his eyes screamed something else. Uncertainty. The kind that creeps in when power feels a crack. The empty courtroom amplified the silence. Lila tucked the journal back into her cart, folded her rag with care, and faced him squarely. "I know my job, sir," she said, her tone calm but edged with defiance, echoing her hallway retort. Harlan flinched, barely, but enough for her to catch it. He straightened, clawing back his authority. "This is my court," he hissed. "Cross me, and you're done." Lila said nothing, she didn't need to. Her silence was a blade, sharper than his threats. She pushed her cart toward the exit, leaving him staring at the spot where her journal had been. For the first time, Harlan realized he wasn't just being watched, he was being hunted. And Leila Monroe, the nothing cleaner, was holding the leash. In the hallway, Leila paused by a flickering vending machine. She opened her journal, drew a line next to Vincent Harlan, and wrote, "Threatening. Nervous, he knows I'm watching." She snapped it shut, her mission no longer just about Devin's case. This was bigger, a war against a system Harlan thought he owned. And Lila was ready to fight. The courthouse break room was a dingy cave, flickering lights casting shadows on chipped counters. The coffee maker gurgled, spitting out a bitter stench. Lila Monroe stood at the sink, rinsing her hands, her battered journal, the one she'd nearly been caught with by Judge Harlan, tucked safely in her cart nearby. She was still wired from their clash in courtroom 5A, where Harlan's threats had only sharpened her resolve. She'd come to Chicago to expose him, and every move he made was proving her right. Clara Evans, a graying court clerk who'd seen decades of the system's grind, shuffled in, clutching a cracked mug. Her usual stoic mask slipped, her lips tight as she stirred her coffee with too much force. Under her breath, she muttered about Harlan, how he'd bulldozed Devin Carter's defense that morning, like justice was just a formality. Lila dried her hands, slow and deliberate, her mind flashing to Devon's clenched fists in the courtroom. "Some folks shout about law," she said, voice low, almost to herself. "But justice? It's a whisper you gotta strain to hear." Clara froze, her spoon clinking against the mug. She glanced at Lila, puzzled, but something in those words stuck. Lila gave a faint nod, just like she had when she'd first sized up the courthouse at dawn, and moved on. That was her gift, saying just enough to plant a seed, to make people wonder. Clara stared after her, the spark of a question forming. Later, in the bustling hallway outside courtroom 5A, Lily crossed paths with Ethan Hayes, Devon's young lawyer. His suit was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights fighting a losing battle. He nearly passed her, lost in thought, but paused, drawn by the quiet strength in Lila's stance, the same strength she'd shown when she faced Harlan's glare. He vented, voice low. The case was rigged, Harlan was untouchable, and Devon didn't stand a chance. Lila listened, her gaze steady, seeing the same frustration she'd clocked in Devon's shoulders. Then, almost offhand, she mentioned a rare legal precedent, a federal case that could shift the... Her tone was casual, like she was commenting on the weather, but her words hit Ethan like a jolt. He blinked, caught off guard, but before he could press her, Lila was gone, her cart squeaking around the corner, vanishing like the ghost she'd promised to be. That evening, as the courthouse settled into a hush, Clara and Ethan carried Lila's words with them. Clara couldn't shake that phrase, "justice whispers," replaying it as she locked up her desk. Ethan, back at his cluttered office, typed Lila's legal tip into his laptop. The case popped up exactly as she'd described, sharp, relevant, a lifeline. Neither knew Lila was more than a cleaner, but both felt it, she wasn't just passing through. And in the courthouse's cold halls, where Harlan's shadow loomed, something was stirring. By afternoon, courtroom 5A was a pressure cooker. Sunlight slanted through high windows, dust swirling in the tense air. Devon Carter sat at the defense table, his borrowed jacket hanging loose, his eyes locked on the floor like he was bracing for a blow. Ethan stood at the podium, voice cracking as he challenged the prosecution's weak evidence, the mismatched footage, the flaky witness. But Harlan wasn't listening. Slouched in his chair, he looked bored, annoyed, cutting Ethan off mid-sentence with a lazy wave. "Counselor," he drawled, "you're testing my patience. The gallery family, a few activists," shifted uneasily, sensing the verdict forming like a noose. Lila, in her corner, had ditched her mop. Her cart, the same one she'd rolled through the halls since dawn, stood forgotten. Her eyes, sharp as ever, pinned Harlan, tracking every smirk, every dismissive glance. She wasn't just watching anymore, she was deciding. She'd seen enough. Harlan's bias in the courtroom, his venom in the hallway, his panic when she'd held her ground. This wasn't justice. It was a game, and Devon was the pawn. Harlan turned to Devon, his voice hardening, ready to seal the kid's fate. Lila's hand twitched toward her cart, not for a rag, but for something else. Something that could shatter Harlan's stage. She'd come to Chicago for truth, and now, with Harlan's mask slipping, she was ready to strike. Judge Harlan's voice cut through courtroom 5, heavy with finality. "Based on the evidence," he sneered, leaning forward, "this court is ready to..." He froze as a clear, steady voice sliced the air. "Your Honor, I need to speak." Heads whipped toward the back, Lila Monroe stepped forward, leaving her cleaning cart, the same one she'd pushed through Chicago's courthouse since dawn, behind. No mop, no rag, just the quiet fire of a woman done hiding. She'd watched Harlan rig this trial all day, just as she'd seen his venom spill in the hallway, his panic when she'd stared him down. Now, her mission to expose him was no longer a shadow game. Harlan's smirk was pure venom. "You?" he scoffed, voice dripping with scorn. "The cleaner? What could you possibly have to say in my court?" His words were a slap, meant to shrink her, but Lila didn't blink. She'd faced his threats before, in that dim hallway where he'd called her nothing. This time, she was everything. Her hand dipped into her jacket, pulling out a leather badge holder. She flicked it open with a flick, the seal glinting under the courtroom lights. United States Supreme Court. Gasps erupted, chairs creaked, and the bailiff's hand twitched, unsure whether to move. The room felt like it had lost its air. "I'm Lila Monroe," she said, voice calm but unyielding, echoing the steel she'd shown when she'd first vowed to hunt Harlan. "Associate Justice, U.S. Supreme Court 15 years, ascended to this position. I'm here undercover, sent by the Department of Justice after reports of civil rights violations in this courtroom. Your courtroom, Judge Harlan. Harlan's face drained of color, his lips parting, no words coming. Lila took a step closer, her gaze ablade. For weeks, I've watched you twist justice, bias, abuse, shutting down defendants like Devin Carter because of their skin. Today's trial is just the latest proof. The room was a held breath. Devin, still at the defense table, stared wide-eyed, hope flickering in his face for the first time. Ethan Hayes, his lawyer, gripped the podium, stunned. The gallery, family activists, leaned forward, hanging on Lila's every word. She wasn't the cleaner who'd scribbled in her journal at dawn or faced Harlan's threats in the hallway. She was a force, and Harlan shrank before her. She held the room, her voice steady, cutting through years of silence. Let the record show Judge Vincent Harlan has shown consistent misconduct, racial bias, ignoring evidence, silencing defense counsel. She pulled a slim folder from her jacket, the journal's contents now organized, every page a nail in Harlan's coffin. In the last 6 months, you've ruled against Black and Latino defendants in 25 of 26 cases, even when evidence was weak or missing. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Harlan shot up, voice shaking. This is a setup. You're twisting numbers to smear me. His bluster was hollow, his hands trembling. Lila didn't flinch, her calm more damning than anger. Not twisting, Judge. Documenting. I've tracked your rulings, your interruptions, the way you smirk when the prosecution speaks and scowl at a kid like Devin. It's not chance, it's a pattern. She'd written it all in her journal. From the first notes in her hotel room to the hallway confrontation, every piece now a weapon. Harlan's face twisted. This is a witch hunt, he roared. Political garbage from people who want to ruin this court. The court reporter's fingers hovered, unsure whether to keep typing. Lila closed the folder, her eyes locking on his, unyielding as they'd been when she'd faced him down hours ago. This isn't politics, Vincent. It's truth, and it's catching up. She turned to the clerk, placing the folder down with deliberate care. I'm filing a report with the Judicial Oversight Board. Every ruling you've made in the last year will be reviewed. You're done hiding. Harlan sank into his chair, breath shallow, the king of courtroom 5, reduced to a ghost. Lila's gaze shifted to Devin, the kid she'd watched fight for air all day. His eyes were wet, not with fear now, but something new. Hope. She'd come for him, for every kid like him, silenced by gavels like Harlan's. The weight of her badge wasn't power, it was duty, and today, she'd honored it. Lila Monroe's words hung in courtroom 5A like a thunderclap, her slim folder packed with the truth she'd scribbled since dawn, now a guillotine over Judge Harlan's reign. She'd unmasked him, her Supreme Court badge flashing like a beacon, just as she'd planned when she first slipped into Chicago's courthouse. Your rulings, your bias, your abuse, she said, voice steady as steel. They end now. A full audit of your last 5 years, every case, every sentence. Starts today. Harlan slumped in his chair, face ashen, his once iron grip on the room crumbling. The king of courtroom 5A was no king now, just a man staring down his reckoning. Lila's gaze flicked to Devin Carter, the 19-year-old kid she'd watched fight despair all day, his eyes now bright with something new. Hope. This was why she'd come, not for glory but for kids like him, crushed by gavels like Harlan's. The room was still, not with shock but awe. Moments ago, Harlan had been led out, his robe slipping off one shoulder, his steps faltering like he'd walked into a void. No gavel fell, no final bang, just a shift, quiet but seismic. The clerk's voice trembled as she read the verdict. Case dismissed, charges dropped. Devin Carter is free. Silence held for a heartbeat, then the gallery stirred. Not with cheers, but with a heavy shared relief. Devin's family gripped each other's hands, heads bowed, whispers of gratitude rising. Ethan Hayes, his rookie lawyer, stood frozen, still processing Lila's bombshell reveal in the same room where he'd fought a losing battle hours ago. Devin turned to Lila, eyes glistening, no words needed. His look said it all. Gratitude, disbelief, a future reclaimed. Lila gave him a small nod, the same one she'd offered when she'd first seen his defiance through fear. You were never invisible, her eyes seemed to say. Then she turned, grabbing her jacket, the one hiding her badge, and moved toward the exit. Her cleaning cart, the prop she'd pushed through these halls since facing Harlan's threats, stayed behind, no longer needed. People parted as she passed, not out of duty but reverence, their eyes tracing the woman who'd turned truth into a blade. At the doorway, a voice called from the gallery, soft but urgent. "Ma'am, one last word." Lila paused, half turning, her face calm but fierce, echoing the resolve she'd shown when she stared down Harlan in that hallway. "Justice dies when bias rules the bench," she said, voice cutting through the hush. "But truth? It always breaks through, no matter how deep you bury it." The words landed like a promise, a spark for everyone watching. She stepped outside, the Chicago air sharp, the setting sun painting the courthouse steps gold. Lila stood at the top, breathing deep, not a victor, but a woman who'd done what was right. She didn't glance back. Some moments don't need a second look. They just need to burn bright in memory. Leila Monroe's fight wasn't just about a Chicago courtroom. It was about standing up when the world tells you to stay small. Her story teaches us that truth, no matter how buried, can break through if you're brave enough to carry it. In our own lives, we face moments where silence feels easier, but Leila reminds us justice starts with one voice, one step, one choice to do what's right. So, what's your truth worth fighting for? Take that lesson, hold it close, and act, because even the smallest spark can change everything. If Lila's courage moved you, smash that like button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive, and we're so grateful for every one of you. Drop a comment, tell us what truth you're ready to stand for. Hit subscribe to never miss the next chapter. Thank you for being here. You're at the heart of this journey.